We don't have the original New Testament manuscripts. We only have copies of copies of copies. So we have no idea if what we now have is what the original manuscript said.
So this is kind of like the old post office type.
Yeah, the attempt to telephone.
Yeah, telephone.
Yeah, you know, you tell somebody at the back of the class and they keep passing it, and purple monkey dishwasher at the end.
You know, I heard Skinner say the teachers will crack any minute.
Skinner said the teachers will crack any minute. Purple monkey dishwasher.
Well, we'll show him. Especially for that purple monkey dishwasher remark.
And y'all get a good laugh.
Yeah. And so he's claiming that's what happened with since we don't have what the originals are. That's what happened.
Right. And no one claims unless you're like a super fundamentalist about of what the originals you change what the originals are to fit that definition, but no one disputes the fact that we don't have the original manuscripts.
Right. Yeah. So he starts off this section by, asking the question, the text of the New Testament, is it reliable? Right? Is it reliable, the text that we have? We all know ancient literature by way of copies. That's how we know all of ancient literature, not originals, right? We don't have the original of Plato or whoever, Virgil, whoever, right? And so in this way, the New Testament really is no different than all the rest of the ancient literature that we have.
Right, in this aspect, yeah.
Right, right. But the New Testament is different, however, from all other ancient literature in that, at least in terms of what we're talking about here, it is far and away the best attested book in antiquity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, anybody from the Roman period to the Grecian period to any period around the time of the Bible would kill to have
as many
the manuscripts
and
the copies and the preservation and just it's quite interesting how far and away the Bible is as far as the number of manuscripts within short periods of time. You can look at it 500 years out, 1,000 years, 1,500 years, and just see this was an important document to say the least to the world.
Yeah.
And, more so than, Augustus Caesar living or, Homer is the next one. Homer's Iliad is the next most copied version. So even within that, you have textual variants within that, too.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, yeah.
In ancient manuscripts of any kind are difficult to come by, obviously. The world that they lived in, the type of material that they were made from. There's a reason that northern Africa seems to be where a lot of these things come from. The Qumran Valley, too. Yeah. Just how these scribal communities preserved manuscripts, the air, the salt water coming in. All these things corrode. Time keeps moving, and unfortunately, so do the manuscripts. So consider the number of manuscripts that exist for some significant works of antiquity. First,
what? Like what?
The works of Roman historian Tacitus were written in the 1st century. 3 manuscripts.
3 manuscripts.
Right.
All right. Well, we got 3 manuscripts of Tacitus.
So, okay. He's a Roman historian, so obviously no one needed his work. The Institutes by Gaius was written in the 2nd century. 3 manuscripts.
Okay, so there we are.
Yeah.
3. So 3 seems to be a good number here. 3 manuscripts.
Right.
You can check and say, okay, is this one like this one like this one?
Yeah.
3, right? Yeah.
The history of Rome, again, the formation of the birthplace of humanity.
One of the greatest empires that ever existed.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Written 1st century by Patelicus.
Okay.
And we only have 1 manuscript.
Oh, just one of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're so well used, probably. That's why. Everyone had a copy. It's like the Da Vinci Code. Everyone had a copy. And it sat on everyone's shelf. Probably one of the most well-known one, the Jewish Wars by the historian Josephus.
Right.
From the 1st century.
Yep.
We kind of show that Jesus was known outside the Bible from these ones.
Right. He talks about Jesus and what he went through and how kind of the life he lived and that sort of thing.
The wars the Jews fought, and it's an interesting read from a historical perspective. So a little bit more than 3. We have 50 manuscripts.
Whoa,
from them.
okay, so that's 50 of those,
and so a lot of people who are studying from that point of view use all of these as sources of information to inform them about the history of Rome, Roman society.
where do we get the history of Rome
right,
from?
the factor
These
of the Middle
manuscripts,
East,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how does that contrast with the Bible there, Tony?
Well, by contrast, the Bible has a little more than 50. 50 is a lot, right?
Yeah, 60.
60. Yeah. Now, a little bit more than that. By contrast, we have over 5,800 surviving manuscripts of the New Testament. Over 5,800 surviving manuscripts. What's more, we have innumerable citations of the New Testament manuscripts by way of the early Christian writers and teachers, right, that were in the early church. Right. So they quoted, in fact, these citations are so numerous that Metzger and even Bart Ehrman have declared that these citations would be, notice this, sufficient alone for the reconstruction of practically the entire New Testament, just from citations and quotations of these early
Destroy
Christian
all the
fathers.
Manuscripts.
Yeah.
Just cite secondary sources of the early church fathers or people that are pulling quotes from. You get the New Testament again.
How about that?
That's pretty impressive. But 5,800 surviving manuscripts. Yeah. And there's a group out there that is doing spectrometric scans of these, and so that number does fluctuate here and there because what this library counted is double counted, or we found the scroll rolled up and they did a laser X-ray of it and is able to unroll it digitally.
And so that's another manuscript.
And so they're always releasing different things, and you always hear like P 58, P 63, all these things. So P is for parchment. So there are these snippets within early copies of that original one. I think John 8 is kind of the P36. I think that's one of the earliest ones. So
I think is it 18? It might be 18.
Oh, it could be. Could be. So it's quite interesting to look at these old ones and see, wow, this is generations. Small leaps forward, not huge generations of copies in between, and so we're kind of able to trace a little bit of the history of what the original looked like.
Yeah.
So the New Testament not only has more manuscript evidence than any other book from a similar time period, it also has the smallest time gap between surviving manuscripts and the original manuscript of any work of antiquity, showing that people viewed it as an important document.
So instead of a gap of maybe 1,000, here's when it was written, and here's the first kind of manuscript that survived 1,000 years, maybe 500 or 1,000 years. It's a whole lot shorter than that for the New Testament. Right.
And it's quite amazing just understanding what the history of the early churches as it is in contrast with the Roman history of coming in and viewing it as a religion of derision and rebellion, and wanting to scapegoat Christians for the fall of Rome and the burning of Rome, and then 300 you have Roman Caesar going out and saying find these books and burn them, and in the 300 AD time period, you have the destruction of so many early sources, and so what would have been preserved theoretically if those hadn't been the case. And so the fact that we have 5,800 from a time period where even Christians faced persecution is quite amazing.
Impressive.
Yeah. The New Testament itself was written between AD 50 and 90, and our earliest manuscripts date to only about 35 years after the last book of our New Testament was actually written.
Scrap of a manuscript that's about only 35 years after it was written.
Right. And that's just a known one.
Yeah.
Right. Surviving today. So, and it looks pretty torn up, but you'd probably look the same after 2,000 years.
That's right.
And we have many more manuscripts from the 2nd through the 4th century. So, once you kind of got out of persecution, or once the gospel spread to the world, it's hard for the might of Rome to kind of come down on everything. So, it was the first blockchain. It was the first tracing of family copies right there.
Yeah. Also, the relatively small temporal gap, the time period, means that it's unlikely that the textual tradition could have been radically changed, during the intervening period without there being evidence for changes visible in the manuscripts that, we have available today.
Right. So you'd have to have someone with a lot of power and might and being able to erase the naughty versions that, say, oh, Jesus was actually a woman, or, Jesus said to have multiple wives, or, whatever you think it might have been originally in there. And if you watched enough back in the day when History Channel used to play actually history things, what the original Bible really said.
Yeah,
Then your fanciful imagination, and then you look at the secondary source and you go, oh well, that's not even in there either.
Yeah. So really, what this means, in other words, is that if a particular manuscript of a New Testament book, let's say Mark, had been changed by a scribe in the late 1st century or early 2nd century, it is unlikely that the change would have been able to be to replace the original reading quickly enough so that our 3rd and 4th century copies of Mark would fail to preserve the original text at all. Right. So that's the idea here, because of this small gap between when we have what we have from when it was written.
Mm-hmm. Right.